All right, so let's get started with our building out a CRM in Laravel 8. I'm really excited for this because the last time I did a tutorial on building a CRM or something really noteworthy was back in, I think it was Laravel 5.6, 5.7, somewhere in there. And a lot's changed since then, for the positive, for the good, but not a lot of breaking changes, which is also a real plus with this. Now, that being said, moving into Laravel 8, there's there's a little bit of housekeeping that we might have to take care of, particularly if you're not new to programming, you're not new to working in PHP or with the Laravel framework. So, first of all, Composer's been updated fairly recently. Now there's Composer 2. Upgrading to Composer 2 or downloading Composer with Composer 2 is a good idea because when we go to deploy a new project or when we go to compile a new project, like the Laravel framework, it puts it together a lot faster. I think I saw some chart and statistics that showed it being about a third of the amount of time that it takes now to install Laravel with Composer 2.0. So where you can go to get Composer, and these are the the two things you'll need for this course. One, Composer. You can go to the Composer website, getcomposer.org, and download. And they'll have downloads for Windows if you're doing it here, or if you have PHP installed on Linux or something else. If you're running Linux, I assume you're a little more advanced maybe than some other users, so likely you already know how to deploy this stuff, and maybe you've already done it on your system. The other thing you're going to need is XAMPP. Now, Laravel 8 requires that you have PHP 7.3 and above. Downloading XAMPP for whatever operating system you're working on will be a good idea here. The only thing that you might want to consider when running PHP, of course, is creating an environment variable in Windows. So I'm not going to get into the actual installation of these items. That I'll let you just run through basically the installation, the standard process for installing it. But you definitely need Composer, you need XAMPP. You'll have to actually install it in the order of XAMPP first, and then Composer. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to pull up the system environment variables. This is one thing you're going to want to do. So you go down to your search bar and just start typing in environment, and you'll come up with basically like you see here, edit the system environment variables. Okay. So in here we go environment variables. Now I've already added this. This allows us to access the PHP folder at any time so that we can run our scripts. So down here, you go to path, and you can see if I go down, here I have MySQL. You'll need to download, MySQL comes with XAMPP already, so, but let's see here. You should see it in here somewhere. Yeah, PHP. So the folder that you pull from after you install XAMPP is just XAMPP PHP, and then you can run your PHP files from there. You'll click OK. If you have a terminal window open, you'll want to close that and reopen it in here. Now, the other thing you're going to want to do is you want to download and install the Laravel Installer. So if you don't have the Laravel Installer right now, the easiest way to install that would be Composer global require, and you just go Laravel/installer. Now, right now they're at version 4.0 of the new Laravel Installer, and you might want to download this or update this, because if you're using for example, Laravel's new authentication system, Jetstream. We're not going to use Jetstream in this tutorial. I might do it in a later tutorial. It is a very nice system that they've integrated with the Laravel framework for managing your authentication, and it gives you all sorts of other goodies right out of the box, like, for example, two-factor authentication. So typically for the applications that I build for clients, it's nothing that scales to a really high level. Maybe it's used by 50, 100 people, not anywhere between that kind of user base. So in this case, typically your users, they're not going to have to worry about registering. The administrator of the application is going to take care of registering new users, setting them up in the system, so on and so forth. So that's the approach we're going to take with this CRM. In a later tutorial, I'll probably look at using Jetstream down the road, but for this use case, it's just not applicable. So you go global require Laravel installer, then that will install the latest version if you don't have it in there already. To upgrade it, what you can do is you can go if you already have it on your system. So for example, before Laravel 8 came out, what I had installed on my system was version 1.9 of the installer. We want to install version 4.0. So we go Laravel Installer, and we'll go, let's see here. Oops. Okay. And then that'll take care of installing it. Now mine's already been installed, so you'll see on there nothing to modify in the log file, nothing to install, update, or remove. So you don't need to worry about that. Otherwise, the other option is just to update Composer and then go into the actual JSON file by navigating to this in your browser if you're using Windows. So that's that there. All right, perfect. The other thing you want to do, again, if you don't have the latest version of Composer, you can just go Composer self-update, and then it'll take care of updating Composer for you. So that's basically all we need to do here in terms of housekeeping and setting up our dev environment. So the next thing we want to do is actually install Laravel, and we want to install the CRM in here. So to do that, I just go Laravel new because I've already installed the Laravel installer, and we'll call this one CRM. And it'll go ahead and it will download and compile all of our assets for us. All right, so now we've got our Laravel application installed here. I'm just going to close these out. We don't need these anymore. We'll leave our new tab open in here. And we'll go ahead and we'll open this up in our editor. Okay. Oops, you know what? I'm going to close that here. I'm going to CD into the application and then open it up. All right, now we're brought to the root of our directory, which is great. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our environment file in here. If you've installed it through Composer by requiring the actual Laravel instead of through the Laravel installer, there's things you'll have to run in here, like you'll have to go Laravel key generate. That's important. Sorry. Let's do this again. PHP artisan. Okay, so it looks like that. You'll click enter. If you do that, you'll see that your key is actually generated up here. It was already generated when we actually installed the Laravel installer in there, so we're fine on that. Our DB connection, we are going to use MySQL for the database, and I am going to keep the DB database as CRM in here. And I've already installed that on in my MySQL, but if I go, I don't think I'm logged into. I don't think my server's up and running yet. Oh no, okay, so it's already up and running. If it's not up and running on yours, you can open up the XAMPP control panel and then fire up MySQL, or you can go and you can type in MySQL D in this case. Bear with me just a moment. I'm just going to make my screen a little bit wider. All right, so there we go. We have a little bit wider now. But if you go MySQLD and push enter, that's going to start up your MySQL server in there. All right, so I've already set up my database. If you haven't done that, you just log in MySQL-u root, and down here you'll type in, create database, and then you just call it CRM, and then you're good to go in there. Now mine's already been started, so I could actually go use CRM, and then I could show tables to show you what's in there right now. Okay, but next step will be basically to migrate things over. So we'll exit out of there. Now we know our database is set up on our local machine. MySQL, CRM, typically username is going to be root. If you have something else set up in there, different username and password, you can do that. You can change that here, and you'll be good to go. We'll change our app name in here as well to, we'll say Laravel CRM. Great. Okay, here we go. And for now, I'm just going to do 127.0.0.1, and we'll change our port number to 8000 on there. And that's our local host. You could do localhost 8000. That would work as well, but in this case, we'll just do 127. We'll type it in there like so. Okay, so now that's set up with our environment file. That's great. One thing we're going to want to do now is to set up our authentication scaffolding used in Laravel 7, 6, and 5. We're going to use Vue and Bootstrap to get that done. They're going to leave support in there for Laravel for basically indefinitely. I was watching an interview with the creator, Mr. Otwell there, and yeah, basically they said as a team they're going to continue to support the old authentication system, though they do recommend, depending on your use case, also looking into Jetstream. So we'll do that in a future tutorial. But for now, we'll leave it as is. And we're going to install our Laravel UI. And this is we're just going to basically scaffold everything over. These are some things that we need to download. Okay. So that's installed now there, and then we'll go PHP Artisan, and we'll say UI view, and we're going to go auth in this case. Okay. Now what we need to do is we do need to run npm install, and then we need to compile our assets. So we'll go npm install, just like you see above there, and npm run dev. And that will take care of bringing in all of the assets that we've now downloaded. One other thing, if you're brand new, which I don't assume you are, but if you are brand new, then npm node needs to be installed on your system there as well. Okay. And that I think you go to nodejs.org is the website to download that. Then you can use npm, and you can also bring in other packages, which I believe we'll do in this situation. So now we're going to migrate everything over. You just go migrate for yourself. Myself, I'm going to go migrate fresh. Okay. And you can see we have a users table, password resets table in there that happened from our scaffolding of things over. Now what we'll do is we'll serve up the application. So again, make sure that your MySQL server is running. In here, we'll go PHP Artisan serve. And then we'll go back to our site in here. Let's see here. So 1, 2. Okay, 8,000. And great, you can see we're all set up there with the page. Now we can register, or we can simply log in. In this case, we're just going to log in. We are going to remove the registration controller itself up there. So to get that to work, all we need to do is go down to our routes file. We'll say web, and you can see we have auth routes. And we'll say register. We just need to set this to false in an array. All right. And now you can see our registration is gone. Now what we'll do is we're going to create a user seeder in here. Let's see here. So database, we have our seeders. So we'll say this -call, and we haven't made our seeder yet, but we will here. We'll say users table seeder, and that's going to create our string. This gives a direction to where it is. And in here, I'm going to put up another terminal, and we'll use our artisan command seeder, and we'll say users table seeder. Great. So that's in there now. We go to users table seeder here. And we'll go ahead, we'll create a user. We'll bring that in. Now I use a nice little tool. I believe it's called Namespace Resolver. Let's see here, Namespace Resolver. Yeah, this one right here. So you see this one by Mehdi Hassan. What that gives me is access to a few little features in here. So you saw how easily I was able to use to bring the namespace and everything in here for use app models user. I do that simply by going control when my cursor is set on the class name. I just go control alt I and then I choose what it is. So right now I'm going to choose the user class out of the models folder because this is a model. The other way is to go control alt A, or I imagine if you're using Mac, it would be command alt A. And in here I'm going to use update or create. And now I use update or create typically when I'm seeding a database, because sometimes, for example, when I move to production and I want to say I have a pre-populated set of types, like say status types for something, or category types, or whatever the case might be. If I use update or create, I can actually use a seeder in production, and it's not going to overwrite the other stuff. Now, this is typically you would do that in a situation where the user of the application doesn't have access to update those columns within or those rows within the database, right? So update or create. So this is going to be an ID of 1. This is going to be the main user. And in here, we'll start entering in our information. So let's go to the create users table. Okay, now I go Control P. That's going to open up the menu to then search. This is a way we can quickly navigate around. And then I have a list to choose from in here. For you, what you'll do if you're not using Control P or Command P and then searching for the file by name, you just go down to Database, Migrations, and it's going to be your first migration there. Great. So in here we have a name, we have an email, and then we have a password. So in this case, we'll start with our name, and we'll insert our name. All right, and then we have the email in here, and the email is going to be tyson@modcall.com. And then we'll put in the password as well. Now in this case, I'm going to open up Tinker. So PHP Artisan Tinker. If you're having problems opening up the command panel in here, then I believe it is toggle line. I basically use the control and then the squiggly line just below the escape key, and then that basically opens and closes that for me, right? So in here, password. Now what I'm going to do by opening PHP Artisan Tinker is I'm going to use hash make. This is how we make our passwords. It hashes them, and we'll just call this one password for now. And you can see it gives us this nice long hashed password. The reason we do this is all of our stuff is all of our passwords are hashed. A hash cannot be reversed. I believe it's virtually impossible or very, very difficult to reverse it to actually discern what the original password was. Now, when you do put this in here, don't do the double quotes. Double quotes are going to mess with this. You can see here this has changed because now it thinks that this is actually a variable of some kind in the system. So you just want to use the single quotes, not the double quotes in there. And we'll make a note in here that this is password on that. Okay, so we'll go ahead, we'll save that. Now all we have to do, we can go exit, we'll go PHP Artisan DB seed. Okay, great. Now we've seeded the users table. So from here, we should be able to go back to our page here to where it says login. Enter in my password and my email address. We'll click login, and now you can see I'm actually logged in on the panel here. So that's really good. So far we've got all of our authentication set up, and we're good to go there thus far. Now, what we're going to want to do first of all is I'm going to want to create the ability to add prospects. So when you build a CRM, typically you start by adding prospects and managing those prospects. We're not going to get too fancy in here. We might come back towards the end of the course and actually look at, say, integrating some JavaScript frameworks like Vue. We already have that brought in, but we might look at integrating that to manage certain aspects of our application But in this case, I'm just going to use straight up Bootstrap and PHP to be able to manage that. So we'll go down here. So first and foremost, let's go to our routes file. We'll go to web, and we're going to create. Actually, there's a couple of things that we need to do in here. One, we need to make sure that the user is authenticated. So we know the user is already authenticated. If we use the auth middleware, so middleware is going to help us to basically regulate how our requests come in, what they have access to. It might even resolve some models for us, for example, up front. But you'll see how that all works as we go along here. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to manage our prospects from, not prospects there, sorry, prefix. And we're going to call this prospects in here. Middleware, they do need to be authenticated. That is important. And then we'll create a group, and the group will use base path in here, and we'll call this group base path routes /web /prospects.php in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that file. So routes, we'll go new file, and it's going to be web /prospects.php. Okay, and that's gonna, if we do it that way, it's going to create our folder for us right up front, which is great. So this is a PHP file, so we'll put our PHP stuff up here. And one thing I'd like to do is just make sure that the prefix is understood in the actual file, so we know what we're working from in here. So let's go route get, and we're going to need a place to go in order to manage our prospects. So that's our entry file right here, and we'll create a prospects controller. We'll say class in here, and we'll reference to the index method in there. Now we'll come down here, we'll create that controller. Make controller, and we'll just go like this, prospects controller. And that's going to create a controller for us. We can bring in that namespace by going import class, or you can manually type that up here, as you see. So controllers prospects. Now if we go over to our prospects controller, we can do that one of two ways. The namespace resolver allows us to do that by going to go to definition. And then otherwise you go app, HTTP, controllers, prospects controller. All right, great. Now in here, we need to create an index method. Actually, you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to delete this. A couple of things I want to do. One, so we'll get rid of that. I'm actually going to, we'll call it backend, because we might have a front end of our application for logging in, so on and so forth. So let's create this. We'll call it admin. Do / or / working on Windows, admin prospects controller. But this is going to be a resource controller, meaning we're going to pre-populate it with all of our stuff in there. So let's import this class. Controller. Let's get rid of this. We'll import the class in there. That's great. So admin prospects controller. And in here, yeah, perfect. Okay, in here, prospects controller. Now we can go to the actual definition in there, and we can see that this has all been populated for us. So when we're dealing with this, index is going to be to basically show all of our prospects and and manage them from here. Okay. Create, obviously, we'll go to the prospects creation form. We have that option. And in here, we're going to, this is basically the post request to store prospect, so on and so forth, right? So first of all, we'll go to index. We're going to create a view for this. So we'll return a view. And we'll say admin.prospects.index. And that's going to bring us to our prospects view in here. Now, what we can do is I would like to paginate all of our results. So, because eventually, hopefully we have more than 10, 20, 30 prospects. Typically, I don't like to show, say more than 10 or 20 items on a particular page. So we'll say admin prospects index, and we're going to pass through some data in here being, we'll say prospects. And we're going to bring in our prospect model, so we'll have to build that in just a moment. And we are going to pull in the latest ones first, so the most recently ones added, and we're going to go paginate. Now, we're not really going to see the results of this up front, simply because we need to create the table, create our first prospect, so on and so forth. So let's we'll leave it there for now. Let's go ahead and let's create our model to be able to add prospects, so on and so forth. So the way I like to do that is I'll actually go ahead, I'll create the model, and then I will have it automatically generate a migration for us as well. So we'll say PHP artisan make model, and this model is going to be called prospect, and we just push -m to manage that. Now you can see it's created both a model and a prospects table. So first thing I want to do is let's bring in prospect. So we'll import the class. Perfect. So app models prospect. Let's go to the prospect definition here first, and we're going to make it so that we can actually we can actually insert items into the database. So you go protected, guarded, in there like that. If you want to protect certain aspects of this, you can make some fillable, some hidden when we actually try to call the data from the database, so on and so forth. All right, but we'll leave it there for now. Now let's go to our migration file. So prospects table in there, and we'll go down and we'll start adding a few things in here, like string. We want the prospect's name, so that's going to be a required field. I want the prospect's email. Email. I'll make this nullable for now, just in case they don't have it. We'll say table string, so we got the name. We'll put in the prospects, we'll say profile image. All right. We'll make that nullable as well. What are some other things we might want to add to the prospect? For now, we can just do name, email, and profile image in order to manage it that way. Sometimes I like to add a table like metadata, things that we can cast as an array, things like that. But for now, it's just going to be name, email, and the profile image in here for the prospect. Now what we can do is we'll go PHP artisan and we'll migrate this. Perfect. So now we actually have a prospects table within our database, so we can start adding things to it. So first and foremost, let's go down to create a view in our resources. If we go back to the prospects controller, we can see we have admin prospects index. So we'll go down to resources, views, and I'm going to create a folder. We'll create a file in here, which will be admin/prospects/index.blade.php. And there we have our index file. Now in here, you can see under layouts, we're going to use some Blade directives in here, but we're basically going to use the template that's already been created for us. So all we have to do is extend it and then add our content in here. So basically the way this looks here is on this layouts.app.blade.php page, this contains our navigation bar. You can see it does certain things like if the user is a guest, so they're not logged in, they're not authenticated, or not. And then our content is basically yield right here. So for the home page, we can see we have dashboard written in here, and then you are logged in. If we go down to home in here, we use a blade directive, b extends. We use layouts.app. That's the notation we use to bring in this file here from views. So views layouts.app, and then we're in there. In here we have, a container, some Bootstrap classes in there already for us to use. We're going to change things up a little bit ourselves. Like we might not use container, we might use container fluid to use the full width. We'll add a little navigation bar on the left-hand side, or actually, we'll leave the navigation bar out of the left-hand side. We'll just use the navigation bar that's actually at the top of our page. So let's do that first. We'll go back to app, layouts.app in here. And in here, so this part here is basically if the person's the guest, then it's going to show them the login and register if the route has register. Otherwise, down here is where we can start adding some additional things. So in here we have the username, right? That's basically what's being controlled here, and we have logout as the only option in here. So what I'd like to do is I'm just going to copy this from here to here. I'm going to put this in front of it, and this is where we're going to manage our prospects. Bear with me just a second. We're going to get rid of this, the form, to log them out. Already managed that in there. Aref, drop down dash item. Okay, so that's good. In here we're going to go and we're going to say prospects. Oops. Prospects in there. And then in here we can do like drop down dash item. If you're using VS Code, those shortcuts you see me right in there, basically go back, I went a.drop down dash item, and then I push enter or tab, and then that expands it for me, which is great. In here, we'll say admin slash, actually, we'll use the built-in route methods provided to us by Laravel. So in here, we still have to go back, we have to name it within the routes file, but we'll say admin dot, what's this one going to be? We'll say admin.prospects in here, dot dashboard. Okay. Now what we have to do is we are going to have to go to, well, we'll add this in here. So we'll say manage prospects in here, which is perfect. And we're going to go to our routes file, which is routes web. First, we need to go into here, and we're going to need to provide it a name. So in here, this is going to be admin.prospects is going to be the name. Don't forget to put the period at the end there as well. And then over in our actual prospects file, right here, we'll add name there again, and we'll say dashboard. So this is our dashboards file. Now, if we go back here, we should be able to refresh. Looks like we don't have any errors thus far. We should be able to go manage prospects. Now that brings us to an empty page. Right now, that's because that page isn't populated. So let's go ahead and populate that page. I'm going to close out app.blade.php. We'll click index in here, and we're going to go. We'll write down extends name. You might have to download the Laravel snippets for blade snippets from here. Let me see here. I'll see if I can't find it, and then you can. No, not what I needed. Okay, right here. This is the one I downloaded. So type in Laravel blade snippets, and then you go Winnie-Lin if you want to follow along that way. Basically, anything that's prefaced with B is going to basically extend those snippets for us, which is great. In here, we need to go layouts.app. Again, going from the views folder, layouts, and then app.blade.php. That brings that in. Now we need to bring in a section, and this section is called content. The reason it's called content, if I go back to app here, is under the yield directive, we have content written in here. So anything that says section content will appear, anything that's between here will now appear basically right in here. There's other things we can do as well, like we could change the title up, for example. in here. I don't know if out of the box it includes that, but there's certain things we could do in here. Like we could add a title dynamically, lots of things that we can do in there. But this is the quick start guide essentially to doing this. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use my container class in here. Actually, let's go back to the layouts.app and let's we'll leave it the way it is. That's fine. We'll container on this one. Now I want to bring in a Bootstrap Card class, and I want to create some space between the top and the bottom. And we'll say card-body in here. And one thing, typically this is a pretty typical card that we might build. We could do card header and then write some information in there if we wanted to. We have that option, right? So let's see, card-body. We could do card header. Right now I'm just going to do card body, and I'm going to create we'll do an H1 in here, and the H1 will say prospects. All right, and then we'll do small.text-muted. That's the class we'll use in there, and we'll just say showing all prospects in here. Now, down here, because we passed through prospects as paginated results, we can put a table in here. Actually, we can do it this way. Because it's going to come through as an array, we can check to see how many results are in prospects, basically. So if I say, I'll use bif, and we'll say if prospects -count. Basically, if it's greater than 1, or if it's 1 or greater, then we're going to want to show the table, right? So let's say table.table.table-hover in here. We'll do table head, and we'll add some information in here like, name, email, and we might want to perform some actions on this. Ultimately, I'm going to take this and turn this into cards instead of, just their details like this within a table. But for now, we'll do it this way. So we'll say created at. So basically, when was it created? And then down here, we can start to add some information in here. Now, we don't have any records in the database right now. So that's really the next thing that we actually need to look at doing. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go d-flex for the Bootstrap class. And this is going to act as a container, and I'm going to create a div with a margin left of auto. And then I'm going to create a, let's go to the Bootstrap website for this one. Okay, so let's go to getbootstrap.com and documentation, and we're going to say drop downs in here. Okay. So we go down, we can see we have some drop down options in there. Now, to make this work, let's go like this. Perfect. And we'll copy and paste that in there. I'm going to make this the outline -secondary, and I'm going to make it a smaller one on the page. And I'm going to take the heading in here, and I'm going to put that just above where it says margin left auto. And if we go back to our page, which I've gotten out of, that was no fun. We'll click on home, prospects, manage prospects. We can see we're showing that information. And then we have drop down button in here. You know what? Let's get rid of the button small action in there. And we're going to have one more class in here. It's going to be drop down menu right, so that our menu actually aligns with the right side of that button. Perfect. Okay, so now this lines up with the right hand side. instead of being the left-hand side in there. So that's great. Let's put a little underline in here underneath that menu. Let's go here. HR. Perfect. So that's going to break things up between there and our table. Now in here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to build a form for us to actually be able to create a prospect. So let's say admin dot prospects dot create, and we'll go over to our prospects web routes in here, and we'll say route get. It is a get request, and we'll say create, and that one is going to, we're going to use the create method that's in there, and we'll give this a name of create. Okay, so first of all, so one other thing I want to do in here is just say the name in here is going to be admin dot prospects dot create. At least I think it is. Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, great. So now we have admin prospects create using the prospects controller, which we can go into now, and we can go to create in there. So all we're going to do in here is we're going to return and create a view basically. So return view admin prospects.create.blade.php is what that's going to be. So let's go down to our views file under resources, views. We got admin prospects, and we need to do create.blade.php. And again, b extends layouts.app, and we need to do b section in here, and that's going to be content as the name of that yielded blade directive. Now again, we need to do container, and in here, then we'll say .card.mt-3, just like we did in the other one, and then we'll say .card-body h1, and we're going to call this one create prospect, and we'll leave that as such in there. Let's deflex. So we'll click on create prospect. What's another thing I want to put in here? .ml-auto, so a div with a margin left of auto, so it bumps it off to the right. Let's go back down to this file, and we'll copy and paste this here. And by the way, I do want to, instead of saying drop down button, I do want to just call this one actions. Okay, drop down button, we'll call this one actions in here. And then what we're going to want to do is give them the ability to go back to the dashboard. Okay, so view dashboard. Let's go back to here. We'll tidy this up. We'll say create prospect. We might pull these out as separate components at some point here. We'll see. Okay, so view dashboard, or we'll just click on dashboard. We'll just say dashboard in there like that. All right, so we got create prospect. This goes off to the left. Let's HR, and let's create a form. Method of post. It is going to be a post request that we send through. And we do need to add our cross-site token here to allow us to ship it off. And we'll say b method. We don't need to have b method because it's just going to be post. If it was a patch or a put or a delete or something, we'd have to put that in there. So for now, let's go. We'll say .form-group, and we'll go label, and then this label is going to be called name, and then that'll be an input of string with a form control class. All right, and we'll give this a name of name. Simple enough there. Let's go ahead, and we're going to need, let's see here, we're going to need 3 in total, but 1 will be for the image. So in this case, we'll say name. We need to enter in their email. This is going to be type email. That's going to be email. And then in here, we're going to say prospect. We'll say profile image. Profile image in there. We'll call that file. And let's go to our create users table. No, not create users table, sorry. We need to go back to the prospects, create prospects table. And yeah, so that's written there as profile image. Awesome. Okay, so that's good. So form group, profile image, file, profile image, and then we need a button with which to submit this. So .btn.btn-primary, and then we'll say create prospect. All right, now we're going to need a route to send that to eventually, but for now, I'm going to refresh. Hopefully we got this all right. Yeah, perfect. So that shows up as it should. This here, you can see I did form control input. I need to actually do form control dash file in order to make that look relatively pretty. Perfect. Okay. So that's how that works in there. I don't like to leave my buttons on the left here. I actually, just a personal thing, I like to float them to the right. Or, I mean, you could put it in a flex container and then margin left auto on that. Okay, great. So now in here we can go create prospect. We can add a name, we can add an email, and a profile image. There's other things we might want to do in here too, like adding prospect contact details. Now, you could put everything in a prospect table, but we might want to put prospect contact and keep a record of previous addresses, previous contact information, so on and so forth. But in this case, I'm just going to leave this as such, and we'll create a separate table for that down the road. Now, so we know that's good in there. So now what we need to do is we need a way to actually submit this prospect in order to store it. Now, because we are going to be passing through a file, we need to we'll say enc type, and then it needs to be multi-part / form data. If you don't put this in here, you're not going to be able to pass through images. You might notice this too if I end up switching these over to, say, view components, and I use Axios to update it. That might work as such that way. Okay, so create prospect button, great, we're good there. Now we need a place to actually submit this to. So let's go ahead, we'll create the route here first. Sorry, we'll reference the route here. We're not creating a route yet. We'll say admin.prospects.store in here. Now let's go ahead to our prospects web routes, and we'll say route post store. Actually, you know what? I don't like to do that. We'll just go like this, and we'll say prospects controller class store, and we'll say name is going to be store on there. Okay, great. So prospects controller store, we're good to go. Now the reason I don't need to put like store in here for the URL line is because it's a post request, so it'll only pick up this if it's a post request it goes through. So that's great. Let's go to our prospects controller, and we'll go to store. Now we could use the standard request object in here, but we're going to create basically our own class to manage and take care of our validation here. So in order to do that, we're going to call this one the store prospect request, and we're going to go down here and we're going to create that request. So we'll say PHP artisan make request, and I'm going to say prospects / or / if you're using Windows, prospect store prospect request in here. So that's great. So now I'm just going to save this file in here. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to import that class. I'm going to bring that in at the top, and I'll save that one more time, and then I'm going to go to the definition, in here. So this here is basically, we have two methods. We have one, is this person authorized? So we could do some fancy things in here, like we could check to see if the actual authenticated user is an administrator or they have permission to do this. Or in this case, we might say, okay, well, for the time being, anybody logged in can actually do this. We can also we can actually control this as well by using middleware for the actual route. I think it's better even if you do both, just in case this ends up being used elsewhere. You should control it through here. That's my recommendation. So in here, we're going to need to specify a few things like name. Okay, well, you know what? A name is definitely a required item. A name and email is definitely required as well. And probably we should make this unique because emails are unique. And we'll reference the prospects table to make that work. And then profile, what did I call that? Profile image. Let's make sure that that matches up with the prospects table. Yeah, profile image. Okay. Prospect request, so we'll say profile image. Now I am going to make this nullable in here, so basically they don't necessarily have to pass this through. Some other things we might want to do is we might want to specify Mime types in here, so we'll say mimes, PNG, JPEG, JPEG with a PNG. That might cause problems as well. And then we'll say max file size will be 2 megabytes, which is probably a little bit excessive. And then this is how we can go ahead and store our image. Now there's other things we could do, like we could take the image as a blob itself and put it in there. If we do some little bit of work on the front end with our JavaScript, and then we don't actually have to store an image path if we don't want to. So for now, let's go to, so for now this should work for us. So let's go back out to our prospects controller and let's pass some data through, and then we'll just return the data, the validated data in here. Okay, so request validated, and we'll see if this actually works for us. Let's go ahead. I don't think I need to refresh that, but I will anyways. So we'll say Tyson London. We'll say email Tyson at prospect.com. I'll take an image of my kid here, and we'll create that prospect. Perfect. Okay, so we can see the data actually came through properly in there. Now there's other things too, like let's say for example, let's get rid of email and try to send that through. Okay, nothing happens. We're just sent right back because basically there was an error in there. So we can go ahead. We can actually pick up those errors because we actually are dealing with data that is validated through a form request or through a request class. So because we have errors, how do we actually display them? Well, let's go down to, we'll go back to our create form in here on that view. And I'm going to say, we'll say b for each. This is going to create a for each method for us, or a directive to loop through our data. And we'll say errors dash all as, we'll say message in there. And then from here, we can just display, we'll just display the message. Let's put this in an alert box for now. So we'll say .alert dash danger, and then we're going to just basically print the message and see what things look like in here for us. Ultimately, we probably want to put this through like kind of a list, bullet points, whatever the case might be on there. So let's go ahead back to here. I'm going to refresh this page. And we'll click refresh. We'll get rid of that shortly here. But let's submit it without anything in it. Okay, so the name field is required and the email field is required, right? Okay, so that's great. We'll put in our name field, and the one we're left with is the email field. Okay, So another thing we can do in here is we could create an if statement to basically decide, okay, well, do we want to show this alert or not? And then up here we can say errors, and we can count it. So basically, if it's over 1, then it should show. Otherwise, it shouldn't show in here. All right. Okay. All right. So now you can see it doesn't show. And then if we submit it, yes, it shows. That's great. Okay. So some other things we might want to do in there are, let's see here. We'll create a list instead. So we'll put in a UL tag, and then for each error, we will wrap that in an LI tag. Okay. Okay, great. So let's see what that looks like now. Okay, name, create prospect. Okay, the name field is required. The email field is required in there. So far, so good. Okay, so again, I'll enter in the information here. .com, create the project, and now we're brought over to our validated data, which is great. Okay, so now that we have that taken care of in there, let's go back to we can close our store prospect request because our validation works, which is fantastic. And we'll go down to another index file, sorry. Our prospects controller, and then we'll store this validated data. So we'll say prospect, and we'll say, well, first of all, we want to check, is there actually a file in there for the profile image? And then we want to get the profile image details. So let's say if request has file, profile image, then we want to do something with that, and that's as simple as going request profile image, and then we go store. Now we're going to store this in the public folder, and we'll create a link to the storage, but we'll say public prospects profiles images. We could be explicit in there if we want to, but we'll just say profiles images for now. Now we do need to, what this returns to us after it's taken care of storing it, is it returns us a path, and then we can use that path within our to create our record. So we can do this a couple of different ways. This is the way I like to do it, is I'll create the record and then I'll update it after if it actually has that file. So in here we have prospect, make sure that namespace is brought in. It's already brought in, that's great. We'll go create, and request is going to, because we have the validated data, we can use this message here only, and we can specify the items that we want to put in the prospects table. I like to do it this way. I really like to focus on controlling the data that comes in. So we do that through the store request class, and we can do that here with only. So we'll say name and email, because those things do match in there. It's basically the same as doing this. If I was to update it with an array like you saw when we created a user seeder, basically be like going name and then request dash name, and then doing the email as well, and then storing it in there like this. But this automatically creates a name value pair array for us, which is fantastic. Okay, so prospect is stored in here. Now what we can do is we could say prospect update, and we'll say profile image, and we'll put our path in there. And that's going to take care of that. And now what we want to do is we actually want to redirect the user to our specific route, which would be admin.prospects.dashboard. Okay. And we might want to send some kind of a message along with that too. So we'll say with success successfully created a new prospect. Perfect. Now, this basically creates, we're basically flashing a session variable. So we need to pick up that session variable in back in the dashboard view where we're going to go if it exists. So with success, let's go to index. This is our dashboard in here. And where do we want to set that alert? Let's set the alert up here. So we'll say bif session success. Okay, basically if that exists, then what we want to do is alert.alert-success, and we'll put in session success in there. That'll print out our message if it actually exists. So let's go back here. Refreshing the data is going to refreshing this is going to send the same data through again, and yeah, so confirm form resubmission. So we'll go continue. And it looks like it was successful. And because we have successfully created a new prospect in there, that works. Let's go back to our prospects controller. And I just want to capitalize this in here. All right. Perfect. What else can we do in here? So prospects count, t-body. So now we actually need to bring in the data in here. So we'll use a before each directive. We'll say prospects as prospect. Prospects as prospect, and we'll go tr td. We'll say prospect dash name. Of course, we need to declare this stuff. We need to set this as a proper variable. We'll say, email, and then we'll say created at. And we don't have any actions for this quite yet, but let's refresh. We can see that one goes away, and then we see we have this information here. So created at returns a string like this. I'm sort of satisfied with that, but we could clean that up a little bit here. One of two ways. One, we could go with a proper date class. And here we'll say year. No, we'll say, what should that be? FD year. Put an add symbol in there, and then we'll say hours, minutes, seconds. And this is going to clean this up a little bit. So string to time. Okay, that's how that looks. There's some ways we can tweak this as well. So, and actually talking about tweaking this is a good opportunity for us to actually add some custom attributes. So modify the data that's in the table and spit it out kind of differently. So let's do that here. So instead of doing this, let's actually create an attribute using a magic method, and we'll call this prospect dash pretty created. You name it whatever you want there, but we'll go to our prospect model now. So again, models, so app models prospect, and public function get pretty created attribute. There's probably some other more creative ones you could create. Probably some better names and naming convention you might want to use there. So we'll say return date, and we'll say basically month in the long form, day, year. Okay. That's how that's going to work. Now you can also use Carbon. There's a number of things you can do Often I find these more custom attributes that I'm going to use in the same way throughout the whole application. I do like doing it this way, or even creating your own little helper function, helper method within a class to be able to modify all of them would work as well. So those are definitely some options in there. Okay, so for now, get pretty created attribute. Let's go back out to our page here. We'll refresh, and we can see now we're returning November 3rd of 2020. So some other things we might want to do in here are we might want to be able to view the user profile image. Now ultimately, as we build this out as a card, instead of just doing this in table format, we could add the user's image on the left hand side, and then give ourselves an action button. So we'll do that for now. Tables are a nice way to just very quickly visualize our data and put it out there, which is a reason I like personally working with Bootstrap, because Bootstrap, while a finished application has a number of custom classes, things like that, Bootstrap allows us to really prototype something very quickly. And here in this stage, this is definitely building a prototype. So as an example, when I build out stuff for clients, often I build things out this standard way for us to help us visualize the data. On the administrator side, this might actually be enough for what we need to do. But then on the user side, where the majority of the application is, the audience that the majority of the application is going to be used by, is going to be prettier, it's going to look nicer, things like that. So for now, in this video, we'll leave it at that. In the next video, we'll look at editing the prospect, adding some additional details to the prospect, and then managing other aspects of the prospect for our newly created CRM. So I hope that was insightful. Nothing really new between Laravel 8. We haven't really used anything new between Laravel 8 and 7 or 6 or 5. If you're coming from Laravel, you're just looking to find out what's new in Laravel 8. I mean, we'll get into that more in the next videos as we do things like, start working with factories in order to spoof data, create data on the fly that we can actually work with. You'll start to see some more of those features in there. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll see you in the next video.